The garden had always been silent at dusk, but that evening something moved beneath the roses. Sister Amara was seen for the last time just past Vespers, her white veil flickering in the breeze as she walked toward the southern path of the Bitter Creek, Convent Gardens. The sun was low, casting long shadows between the hedges. The other sisters assumed she was going to pray, as she often did, alone and barefoot, in the sacred grove near the statue of Saint Hildegard. She never returned. Search dogs brought from Montpellier picked up nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign of struggle. Her room was untouched. Her rosary lay neatly coiled beside her pillow, one candle still burned. Her journal, however, was gone. For 9 years, no one walked that path alone. Some whispered that she had seen something behind the old chapel wall. Others said she had fasted too long and wandered into the forest under a vision. But those closest to her remembered the look in her eyes days before her disappearance, a tremble, a glance over the shoulder, the way her hands never stopped moving the beads of her rosary. And then, 9 years later, while tilling the soil, for spring lilies, the gardener's spade struck something metallic beneath the ivy roots near the sacred grove. It was not a tool, it was not a pipe. It was a reliquary, tarnished, ancient, sealed in wax, and inside a lock of silver hair. From that moment, silence was no longer peace, it was warning. 9 years is enough time for silence to become furniture, something you dust off quietly, never question, and learn to live around. At Bitter Creek Convent, silence wasn't just sacred, it was survival. After Sister Amara vanished, the sisters stopped asking questions. Not because they didn't care, but because the air itself seemed to retaliate when her name was spoken aloud. Candles would flicker, locked doors would rattle, and once, just once, the chapel organ groaned without a single finger pressing its keys. Some things are safer, left unsummoned. But still, the memory of her lingered like incense. Faint, sweet, but unmistakable. Every corner of the convent held her echo. The window seat in the scriptorium where she'd read in the early mornings, the small clay bowl in the kitchen marked AM, still washed, dried, and placed back on its shelf, out of habit. And the bench, beneath the arching willow in the garden, where she once wrote letters she never sent. Sister Amara was not loud, she was not charismatic. But there was something about her that made others quieter in her presence, not out of fear but reverence. Her silence was different, not cold or distant, but filled with listening, like she could hear what others couldn't, like something ancient moved in the quiet spaces between her words. She spoke little, but when she did, it was with such precision that even the wind seemed to hush itself. And perhaps that's what made her disappearance so devastating. It wasn't just the loss of a person, it was the rupture of a presence that had, in its stillness, held the brokenness of others. Grief does strange things to sacred places. The chapel roof began to leak. Vines crept higher than before, curling like fingers over window panes. Birds stopped nesting in the bell tower. And in the darkest hours before morning, the night would sometimes carry a sound that wasn't quite a cry but wasn't wind either. Some sisters claimed to see her in dreams, always from behind, always walking toward the garden, never turning back. Sister Agatha, the oldest nun, and one of the few who had known Amara closely, once whispered to a novice, "There are absences that are louder than screams, child," and she left that kind. Amara had come to Bitter Creek after what was only ever called the incident. She never spoke of it, but her hands bore small scars, barely visible, yet always uncovered, as if she wanted to remember. There was a heaviness to her prayer life, like each Hail Mary was being offered as repayment for something unnamed. Her fasting was not prescribed, it was chosen, not in pride, but as if she was starving a darkness she believed still lived inside her. But no one suspected danger, not in the garden, not in the sacred grove. That space had always been the heart of the convent where prayers felt thick, where the ground itself seemed to hum with memory. It was said the first sisters who built Bitter Creek had buried their first relics there. Some believed it to be blessed, others guarded. Still, for decades, no harm had come, until Amara, until that night. The gardener, Brother Eli, had been with the convent for over 20 years. Not a monk, but a lay helper. A quiet man, gentle with roses, and known for speaking to the soil as he worked. After finding the relic, he didn't speak for 2 days. Not out of fear, but reverence. He knew what he had touched was not meant to be found. The reliquary was small, sealed with red wax, marked with an emblem no one recognized. Inside it, a single strand of silver-white hair, unmistakably human, and a slip of linen embroidered with the Latin phrase illum non tetigerant. They did not touch her. It was placed on the altar, wrapped in velvet, and reported to the archdiocese. But they gave no answer. No response, only silence. The sisters began to pray differently after that, louder, longer, as if to reclaim the space, as if they feared that whatever had happened was not yet finished. Whispers returned to the halls. Lamps were left burning through the night. Some began sleeping with rosaries clutched in hand, even those who had long since let ritual fade into routine. There was a sense that something was about to awaken, something buried with the relic, something or someone who had waited 9 years to be remembered. Faith, in its truest form, is rarely loud. It lives in the waiting. In unanswered prayers, in long silences when the only reply is the flicker of a candle or the creak of a chapel pew. And in Bitter Creek, faith was being refined in the fire of mystery. Some sisters clung harder to scripture. Others found comfort in old hymns sung under their breath as they cleaned and cooked. But a few, especially the younger ones, found themselves staring too long into shadows, wondering if Amara's vanishing was a warning. And for those who had known her heart, the pain was different, deeper, more confusing. Because Amara had been the one who once told them, some disappearances are not the end. They're an invitation. But an invitation to what? That night, when the reliquary was placed before the statue of the Virgin, a soft rain fell over Bitter Creek. Not a storm, not a downpour, just enough to tap against the stained glass and cleanse the ivy leaves. As the sisters knelt in prayer, each felt a heaviness settle on their chests, not fear but expectation. And one of them, Sister June, barely 28, felt a sudden warmth in her palms. She opened her hands and found her rosary had snapped. The beads lay scattered across the chapel floor like seeds, seeds of something awakening. If this feeling is familiar to you, comment, "I've felt it too." Sister Amara had always followed the rules, but in the final weeks before her disappearance, she began bending them in ways no one dared confront. It began with her candle. Each sister was assigned a single taper, kept by their bedside and lit only during evening prayer. But Amara's flame often burned past midnight, flickering against the dormitory window like a quiet alarm. More than once, Sister Claire had awakened to find Amara still kneeling, lips moving soundlessly, face pale, hands trembling. And always with the candle lit beside her, casting tall, dancing shadows across the walls. At first they thought it was just grief. Amara had lost someone before entering Bitter Creek, that much was known, though never discussed. A brother? A fiancé? No one knew for certain. Only that her vows had come with eyes already full of sorrow and silence not learned, but carried. But as the days passed, something shifted. Her silence stopped feeling sacred and began feeling afraid. She startled easily, avoided the chapel stairs. She fasted beyond what was permitted, sometimes going days with only water and black bread. Her handwriting, once delicate and rounded, turned jagged in the sign-in ledger. She started whispering prayers in Latin, not softly, but forcefully, like she was pushing something back. And then came the morning Sister Claire found her shaking in the garden. Amara had no recollection of how she got there. Her veil was missing, her feet muddy. When asked what happened, she said only, "It's watching now. I opened something I shouldn't have." Claire tried to brush it off as stress, maybe even the onset of illness. But that evening Amara was seen burning pages in the fireplace, old paper, thin, yellowed, and as the smoke curled upward, those nearby swore they smelled roses. After the reliquary was found, the convent allowed a formal review of Amara's remaining belongings. Inside her dresser, beneath a false panel, was a small notebook. No name, no cover, just brittle pages and erratic ink, like they had been written in the dark. The first entries were typical, meditations on scripture, reflections on humility. But as the pages turned, something changed. Her language grew dense, obscure, more poetic, less orderly. And near the end, a recurring phrase began to appear, non est vox, sed voluntas. It is not a voice, but a will. She wrote of waking with scratches she didn't remember receiving, of hearing her name spoken not aloud but within, of dreams that bled into daylight, where she walked into the chapel and saw the crucifix weeping, its eyes open and watching. And then there was the list, a single page, folded 3 times and hidden at the back of the notebook. On it our sequence of Gregorian chant lines, not part of any known liturgy, a crude drawing of the sacred grove, with a symbol carved in its center, a circle within a triangle, and beneath it all, written in a different hand, shakier, as if under duress, do not dig where the lilies bloom, it waits beneath. After the journal was reviewed, the Mother Superior locked it away, but not before Sister June copied the symbol. She recognized it, not from theology, not from church doctrine, but from a stone Amara had once worn around her neck, a small dark pendant she kept tucked inside her robe. Most assumed it was a keepsake, but June had seen it once when Amara fell during a late-night procession. The pendant had slipped free, cold and heavy, with that very same symbol etched into its face. When June asked her about it the next morning, Amara simply replied, "Some prayers aren't meant to be answered, but they are." That sentence haunted June for years. There was another clue, one that no one talked about outside hushed whispers. The statue. In the sacred grove, beyond the lilies, stood a carved figure of St. Hildegard, arms open, eyes closed, mouth parted as if mid-breath. It had stood untouched for decades, but a week before Amara vanished, the statue changed, not visibly, but viscerally. Several sisters refused to go near it, claiming they felt something standing behind it, watching through the trees. Birds stopped nesting on its arms. The air grew colder near its base, and Amara began kneeling before it for hours, even in the rain. Once, Sister Agatha saw her speaking toward the statue, not praying, but conversing. And when asked later what she had been doing, Amara answered softly, "I was asking her to forgive me for letting it through." Agatha never pressed further. 3 nights before she vanished, Amara requested private confession. She entered the booth trembling. The priest who received her father Elias, a visiting cleric from Stonevale Monastery, never revealed what she confessed. But his hands shook afterward, and when asked if she was in danger, he replied with eyes lowered, "Pray for her, and pray that whatever she has stirred does not wake." After that night, he left the convent. No explanation. Her final hours remain. A puzzle of details, all incomplete, all unsettling. She was last seen in the garden at 7:04 p.m. The sky had turned grey. The wind had picked up. She was barefoot, her veil trailing behind her like a banner. She held something in her hands, a small bundle wrapped in cloth, and she paused just before stepping into the sacred grove. She looked back once, toward the convent, and smiled. But it wasn't a smile of joy. It was farewell. After that moment, she vanished. No footsteps, no torn cloth, no sound, just the whisper of the wind through the ivy and the sudden silence of every bird in the trees. Later, that night, the bell tower rang once, just once, without a hand to pull the rope. In the weeks following, strange things began to surface. A patch of lilies bloomed out of season, exactly where she was last seen. The chapel's crucifix wept condensation each morning. The statue of St. Hildegard turned slightly on its base, as if facing the garden. And in the quiet of the night, a low hum could sometimes be heard under the floorboards of the chapel, like chanting or distant breathing. But perhaps the most chilling clue came from Sister Miriam, who claimed to hear Amara's voice while praying the rosary, not aloud, inside. "Don't let them unseal it," the voice said. "I'm still here." But not as I was. Now, with the reliquary unearthed, those clues are returning, louder, bolder, closer. The symbol has been found again, etched faintly into the chapel doors, where no one remembers carving it. The lilies have begun to die, and a single page of Amara's journal, one that had gone missing, was found beneath the statue this morning. The ink smeared by rain, but one sentence legible. "We were wrong to bury it in prayer. It does not sleep. It began with the bells. For nearly a decade, the tower bell at Bitter Creek had remained untouched, its rope bound tight, its clapper sealed with linen. After Amara's disappearance, the sisters had agreed, unspoken but unanimous, that the bell should remain silent. It had rung the night she vanished once without cause. No one had pulled it. But 3 days after the relic was uncovered from beneath the garden soil, the bell rang again. One note, low, hollow, distant. It echoed through the corridors like a breath held too long finally released. The younger sisters froze. The elders lowered their eyes. And Mother Eleonora, who had not left her quarters in months, opened her door and stepped out barefoot into the cold stone hallway, whispering only its returned. From that night on, Bitter Creek was no longer just a place of prayer. It became a waiting room. Something unseen had shifted in the walls, in the way the candles moved even when there was no draft. Doors stuck without swelling. The water in the chapel font tasted of metal, and the garden stopped growing. Brother Eli stopped singing. He had always hummed softly while tending to the ground's psalms, folk melodies, sometimes old, Irish blessings. But after unearthing the reliquary, he worked in silence, eyes lowered, movements slower. When asked if he was well, he nodded but never answered with words. The ground no longer felt like earth, he said once under his breath. It felt like breath, like something was breathing beneath it. He dug no deeper. He asked to sleep outside, far from the convent walls. The request was granted. The sacred grove began to rot. The lilies that once flourished overnight turned brown at the tips. The ivy curled inward. The statue of Saint Hildegard, once pristine, now bore faint cracks across her throat like veins of stone. And each evening at precisely 704 p.m., the grove grew colder than the rest of the grounds, not by degrees but by something deeper, the kind of cold that sits behind the eyes and beneath the ribs. Sister June entered the grove once at that hour, hoping to pray where Amara had last stood. She returned minutes later, weeping without sound, the front of her robe soaked though there had been no rain. When she could finally speak again, she said only, "Something is kneeling where she vanished. I felt it move." They told her to rest. But the next morning, the word Pax Peace had been carved into her bedroom door from the inside. She had no memory of it. The relic itself was no longer still. Though locked in a glass case in the convent's reliquary room, the wax seal had cracked. Faintly, subtly, enough for the sisters to smell the air within its sweet coppery floral. Inside, the linen wrapping had shifted, exposing more of the silver-white hair, and on the velvet beneath it, a single drop of clear liquid had appeared. Tested by the local bishop's assistant, it was determined to be human tear fluid, but free of DNA, like water that remembered emotion but not identity. The bishop advised burning the reliquary. Mother Eleonora refused. "It is not ours to destroy," she said. "It is hers, or what was hers, or what she contained." From that day on, the reliquary room was locked, and prayers were assigned in rotating shifts outside its door. The whispers began next. At first they were dismissed as wind, then as echoes, then as tricks of tired minds. But too many sisters heard them, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always in Latin, always beginning with illum non tetigerunt. They did not touch her, and followed by fragments no one could fully translate, ancient phrases, broken invocations, sometimes gasps, not words at all, but sharp inhales, as if someone waking suddenly from beneath water. One night, Sister Miriam placed a recorder outside the reliquary room. The playback the next morning revealed 46 seconds of silence, then a sound like fingers on old wood, then Amara's voice, clear, gentle, broken. "I am beneath, I am within. Do not pray it shut again." Miriam fainted. The recording was destroyed. The Mother Superior called for a fast. 3 days, no meat, no song, no speech, except for prayer. The halls fell quiet, and in that quiet, something moved. It was not seen, only felt. Objects shifted slightly when eyes were turned away. Crucifixes tilted by a breath. The statue of the Virgin in the front chapel wept what appeared to be oil, thick, fragrant, and black as ink. Analyzed by a chemist in Montpellier, it was identified as Muria sacra, sacred brine, used in ancient rites of sealing, but no one in the convent had ever possessed it. On the second day of fasting, Sister Agatha was found in the library, kneeling. Before an open book she had no memory of retrieving, the page an illustration of Saint Dymphna, patron of the mentally afflicted. Beneath it a phrase underlined in red ink, though no red pens were allowed inside the convent. "Those who shelter, the burdened may carry the stain." Agatha whispered she did not vanish, she held it for us, and now it wants a new vessel. Fear does not always come with panic. Sometimes it comes in reverence, in quiet obedience, in trembling prayers spoken between clenched teeth. The sisters continued their rituals, continued their prayers, but a weight pressed down now spiritual, atmospheric, ancient, and still the bell rang each night at 7:04 p.m. once, low, like a breath through bone. Mother Eleonora finally spoke to them all. Gathered in the sanctuary, she looked not like a leader but like a mourner. "I was there," she began, "the night Amara came to me. She held something in her hands, not the reliquary, something older. She said she had found it beneath the grove, that it spoke not in words but in sensation, and she asked me to bless it." She paused. I refused, because I knew it was not of God. But she was already gone even then. She looked to the statue. "I think Amara buried herself alive in silence to keep us safe." And then, almost in a whisper, but the silence cracked, and now it breathes again. Outside, the garden remained still. The lilies had withered, the ivy had blackened, and the soil beneath the sacred grove had begun to pulse, subtly, almost imperceptibly. But if one stood long enough barefoot in silence, they could feel it, a heartbeat, not their own. It started in their dreams. The same image whispered across 12 separate accounts, a garden without color, soil split like wounded skin, and Sister Amara standing at its center, not decayed, not young, but still. Eyes closed, lips parted, hands cupped in front of her, chest like she was holding something heavy, invisible. She didn't speak. But behind her something rose. It had no face, no form, only mass, a silhouette of hunger and memory, rising like smoke from beneath the roots. Its shape shifted with breath, like a wound trying to decide what scar it would become. When the sisters woke, most did not speak of it, not at first. But over the next 3 nights the dreams spread, and then, worse, some did not wake alone. Sister June screamed first. The dormitory fell into chaos at 2:47 a.m. Her bed had been soaked not with water, but a thick, sweet-smelling fluid that resembled wine. On her arms faint bruises in the shape of fingers, though no one had touched her. She sobbed not with fear but with betrayal. "She showed me the grove," she cried. "She said it was beautiful. She lied." In the morning her voice was hoarse, her eyes bloodshot, and her hands, once steady in embroidery, trembled too violently to hold a needle. She asked to leave the convent, but the gates wouldn't open, literally. The locks, rusted from years of disuse, had fused. Brother Eli tried hammering them loose. They didn't move. The sisters were now sealed in, not by force, by design. That same day, Sister Miriam lost her reflection, not permanently, not entirely, but for 1 full hour while washing her hands. In the vestry, she looked into the mirror and saw nothing, no face, no outline, only steam. When it cleared, her eyes returned first, then her mouth, but her hands remained invisible. And when she looked down in terror, they were still there, but trembling. A cold breath passed behind her. She offered her shape. A voice whispered, "Will, you." The statue cracked again, this time across the chest, as if the stone was breaking from inside. Mother Eleonora ordered the sacred grove sealed, wooden planks, nails, holy water, salt. But the next morning, the boards lay on the ground, perfectly arranged in the shape of a cross, each nail placed gently in a small pile beside them like offerings. No one confessed to entering, but Sister Agatha's robe bore traces of soil up to the hem. She remembered nothing of the night, only that she had dreamt of singing in Latin, I gulp, him she'd never heard and never wanted to again. In the chapel, the crucifix tilted forward, just a centimeter, but it had never moved before. And behind it, on the stone wall, appeared a dark stain, circular, veined, faintly pulsing. The same symbol from Amara's hidden journal, the circle within the triangle, the heart within the silence. By the 5th day, the convent's sacred texts began changing. Not all, just the margins. Handwritten notes appeared in ink none of them recognized. Old script, slanted letters, half-erased prayers, verses rearranged, psalms missing words. And in one Bible, left open on the altar, a single word had been scratched in blood between the verses return. It wasn't a request. It was a command. The relic remained sealed in its case, but the glass now fogged from within. The linen inside had unraveled, revealing more of the hair and something new beneath it. A tooth, human, small, still stained with dried blood. No one spoke of it, but everyone saw. And that night, the bell rang not once, but twice. Mother Eleonora collapsed. During prayer, a seizure. Her body writhed in the aisle, mouth foaming. Eyes rolled back until she gasped out in Latin, "She is the gate, and we are the hinge." She recovered, but remembered nothing. Except one thing. Her hands were cold, she whispered. And she kissed my forehead. But it wasn't Amara. The fear shifted then, no longer just of Amara's disappearance, but of what she had become, or worse, what she had invited. The sisters began to question everything. Was she possessed? Was she holy? Was she sacrificed? Or had she made a pact in silence to contain something older than language? The birds did not return. The bees vanished from the garden. Even the wind refused to cross the sacred grove. But inside the convent, motion continued. Chalk drawings appeared on the floor, overnight circles. Eyes, a woman's silhouette. And above the door to the reliquary room, the phrase appeared in Ashvidi et non, surrexit. I saw, and she did not rise. A page from Amara's journal surfaced that had not been there before, still warm to the touch. Its final line scrawled in desperation, "To carry it is to dissolve. To dissolve is to protect." I chose silence over salvation. Did you feel that too? Right. I felt the presence. The night of the 7th bell, Sister June entered the reliquary room, alone. She had not been assigned. She had not asked. Something, a voice, a sensation, a memory that was not hers, had woken her just after midnight. She found her feet moving before her will had caught up. Her rosary clutched so tightly it left welts on her palms. The key impossibly had already been in the door, as if waiting. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air changed, not colder, not warmer, thicker, like breath, like memory, like stepping inside something living. She closed the door behind her, and the silence inside was so complete it rang. The reliquary sat on a pedestal of marble, surrounded by wax-dripped candelabras. Their flames danced as if disturbed by wind, but there was none. The glass case was now almost entirely opaque from within. Moisture, breath, or something else. June took one step forward, then another. Each footfall echoed as if the room had expanded around her. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the case. It was warm. Not just warm pulsing, and then it spoke. Not with voice, but with presence. Words did not fill the air, they filled her bones. I did not vanish, I became the vessel, and now it leaks. June stumbled back, eyes wide, heart hammering. She saw a flash, not in front of her, but behind her. Own eyes Amara kneeling in the grove. Her hands split, bleeding, pressing something deep into the earth. A whisper in Latin, a weeping face. And the shadow behind her, enormous, faceless, watching, waiting. June collapsed to her knees. Tears spilled freely. "Why show me this?" she whispered. "Why now?" And again, the reply, a pulse, a knowing. Because I cannot contain it alone anymore. That night, June didn't sleep. She returned to her room and wrote in her journal for hours. Not her words, Amaras. They came without thought, without effort, in full Latin. By dawn, her eyes were sunken, her fingers stained. the pages filled with drawings, symbols, and one phrase repeated across 5 pages: I am beneath the garden still, but I am no longer whole. Mother Eleonora summoned her at sunrise. She had known something was coming. The sisters had seen the lights in the reliquary room, the flickers, the movement. June sat before her, shaking. I saw her. I heard her. And, she said, it's leaking. Eleonora closed her eyes. For a long time. Then we have very little time. She turned, pulled open the drawer of her prayer desk, and removed a parchment long hidden. Old, frayed, smelling of oil and ash. On it a rite. Not sanctioned, not holy, but ancient. It was given to me by Father Elias before he left, she said. He told me that if the reliquary ever broke, someone would need to enter the grove again, and not to seal it. She turned back. But to finish what Amara began, the rite required 3 elements: the hair from the relic removed with prayer and placed in salt soil from the exact spot of Amara's last footsteps, and a vessel willing to bear the weight not forever, but long enough to carry it to the veil between. June did not hesitate. It chose me, she said. Or maybe she did. By noon, the convent moved like clockwork. The sisters prepared for what none of them could explain. Rooms were cleansed. The chapel was draped in black. Sister Miriam fasted in, silence head bowed, holding Amara's torn journal like a Bible. Sister Agatha anointed the threshold of every door, and Brother Eli dug, carefully, methodically. Returning to the sacred grove with shovel in hand, he unearthed the exact spot the relic had come from. The soil, he said, no longer resisted. It welcomed him, like a wound recognizing the hand that made it. The ritual was set for sunset. But at 3:17 p.m., the statue of St. Hildegard shattered, split clean down the middle. Inside its hollow chest, a second relic, a matching strand of hair woven into a crown of thorns. No one had ever known it was there. But Eleonora did not seem surprised. She hid pieces of it, she whispered. She divided the burden, hoping to delay the breach. At 4:44 p.m., the sky turned gold, then green, then gray. Birds circled and fled. The bell did not ring for the first time in 7 nights, because there was no need. The presence was no longer warning. It was waiting. The sisters gathered in the chapel. The relic, now fully exposed, pulsed in the light. The hair shimmered with a metallic sheen. The tooth had dissolved into the cloth, and the linen had turned from white to crimson. Not stained. Changed. June stepped forward. Her hands did not tremble. Her voice, when she began the rite, came not from memory but from inheritance. The words rolled off her tongue in perfect cadence. The Latin formed shapes in the air, and as the rite reached its center, the wind returned. Inside the chapel, no windows open, no doors ajar, and it smelled of lilies, but also of blood and something older. The air shimmered, not visually, spiritually, as if something stepped forward from behind a wall no one could see, and June fell to her knees, eyes wide, chest heaving. She's here, she gasped, but she's broken. Then she screamed, not in pain, in grief. She tried to hold it too long, it hollowed her. She's the relic now. Silence fell, and in that silence, they heard her. For the first time in 9 years. Not a voice, a song. Amara's humming. Faint, fragile, familiar. From beneath the floorboards, from the soil, from the chapel walls. A lullaby she used to hum while washing dishes. A melody none of them had sung since. And with it came one final whisper, if one of you still believes I can be free. June did not speak for 12 hours. She sat curled at the foot of the altar, face pale, body still, eyes open but somewhere else. A stillness so absolute that even breath seemed suspended. A stillness the sisters didn't dare interrupt. They prayed around her in shifts. They lit candles, sang psalms in broken harmony, read aloud the words of St. Teresa and the sorrows of Mary. They touched her shoulders, wiped the sweat from her brow, and whispered Amara's name like a fragile rope tying the past to the present. But June did not respond until dawn. The sun had just begun to stain the eastern stained glass with color when June stirred. She inhaled like someone surfacing from deep water, then turned her face slowly toward the statue of the crucified Christ. Her eyes were no longer afraid. They were filled with something far older, knowing. She spoke in a voice not entirely her own, not deep, not altered, but shadowed by another. I am her remembering. Her first sentence silenced the chapel. I am her remnant, not spirit, not soul, but sacrifice stored in flesh. She made herself a lock, but every lock rusts. The sisters knelt, not in worship, in reverence. Something sacred was unraveling, and it wore June's face. She continued. Before she took the veil, she found it. A book, bound in skin, hidden beneath. The floor of an old rectory in Georgia before she ever knew the convent, before she wore the white. The book had no words, only symbols, etchings, a map of pain. And a prayer not meant for light. She read it once. That was enough. The sisters listened, breath held. It came in dreams first, then in thoughts not hers, then in the walls. It didn't want worship. It wanted anchor. It cannot live without memory. And so it waits for broken things, for those with wounds deep enough to host it. She paused. A long silence. Then she offered herself, because she believed it was better her than anyone else. Better it live inside silence than inside a scream. She buried the first piece in the sacred grove, the hair the second inside the statue, the third her voice cracked. She carried. The sisters looked to one another. Agatha whispered, her body is the reliquary. June nodded, eyes wet. She thought faith could seal it, that her prayers were enough mortar, that silence could starve it. But silence is its food. The less she spoke, the stronger it grew, until she was just the echo and it was the voice. Mother Eleonora stepped forward, trembling. Why didn't she tell us? June turned to her, and the voice that replied was fully Amaris, gentle, familiar, sad. Because I loved you. Because it threatened to leap into whoever heard its name, because silence kept you safe, until the seal broke. Another vision overtook her. She rose from her knees, eyes unfocused. There was a night I tried to leave. I made it to the edge of the forest, barefoot, bleeding, and the trees bent in my path. I heard the bell before I touched the gate. It was inside me by then, ringing, marking time, and I knew if I left it would follow. Tears rolled down the cheeks of the sisters, not from fear, from grief, the kind reserved for martyrs. June looked to the reliquary still pulsing faintly under the glass. The hair was mine, the tooth not pulled, given. Each part of me meant to contain a part of it, but I was wrong. It needed faith to starve, not silence. A long pause. The candles flickered. The chapel walls felt tighter. The air tasted of salt. Then the final confession, it calls itself voluntatum. Not a demon, not a ghost, a will, a presence that feeds on what is withheld. Secrets, shame, regret, silence. The quiet places in our souls where wounds go to rot. She stepped closer to the altar, her face softer now. More June than Amara. I bore it because I thought it made me holy. I was wrong. Holiness is not holding darkness. It's dragging it into the light. The chapel door creaked. Wind entered. And from the floor beneath the reliquary a breath, long, deep, alive. June's body tensed. She clutched the altar rail. It's coming for voice now. It wants to be named. If I say its name again, it becomes flesh. A choice formed in the air, not spoken but known. Would they name it or bury it again? Would they confront it? Or seal it once more in someone else's silence? June's lips trembled, but her voice held. She wasn't the only one. The words fell like glass on stone. Someone helped her. The sisters stiffened, a collective intake of breath. Not in disbelief, but in the recognition that a truth they had felt hovering for years was finally about to descend. June turned slowly. Her gaze, still shadowed by Amara's memory, moved across the pews and stopped on Sister Agatha, the oldest, the most revered, the one who had been at Bitter Creek before anyone else. Agatha didn't flinch. She closed her eyes and nodded. I opened the first gate. No tears, no defense. Just a long, sorrow-soaked exhale. Mother Eleonora stood, voice trembling. "What are you saying?" Agatha rose. Her hands, once graceful, now twisted. With age held the beads of her rosary, not like a tool of prayer, but like a tether. Before Amara came here, it came to me. In 1953, I was young, angry, mourning. My sister died in childbirth, and I wanted answers no prayer could give. She stepped toward the altar. The candles flickered violently as she passed. I found a text in the monastery's restricted archives, bound in skin, like the one Amara saw, but I read it twice, because I didn't want peace, I wanted power. Gasps erupted among the sisters, but no one moved. I thought if I could understand death, I could undo it, but all I did was open a listening. It came slowly, through thoughts, then sounds, then dreams. I realized too late it wasn't knowledge. It was need. June whispered voluntatum. Agatha nodded. Yes, a will, a hunger. It doesn't enter uninvited. It needs grief. It needs guilt. It needs the door of silence to be opened from both sides. She looked at the reliquary now, the pulse within it stronger as if recognizing her voice. I tried to bury it, to fast it away, but it had already touched me. Then Amara came, full of sorrow, full of faith. I saw in her what I no longer had: purity, and I saw an answer. Eleonora stepped forward. You used her. Agatha nodded slowly. I thought if someone holy held it, maybe it would die inside her. I gave her the second book, told her it was ancient wisdom passed through the saints. I lied, and she believed me. June clutched her stomach, nausea rising. You told her it was sacred. She prayed over it, slept with it, fasted to understand it. Agatha's voice cracked for the first time. She asked me, should I offer myself? And I said yes. Silence fell again, this time not sacred, but shattered. The weight of betrayal hung thick in the air. One of their own had guided Amara into darkness, not by force, but by misplaced belief, by handing her a torch and pointing her toward fire. Sister Miriam stood, her face pale. Did you ever try to stop it? In all these years? Agatha looked up, her voice now barely a breath. Every day, I slept beside holy water. I covered myself in salt. I took vows of silence, not for piety, but to keep from speaking its name again. But I felt it grow. I felt it take root in her, and I knew one day it would need more than one vessel. The reliquary pulsed brighter now, not warm-hot. The linen within it shimmered, the tooth gone, the hair now braided into something new, something forming. June gasped. It's making itself again. Eleonora whispered, and it's choosing. Suddenly, all candles extinguished. The room plunged into darkness, not absence of light darkness, weight of something darkness, a presence pressed against their chests. A whisper moved through the chapel. Who will hold me next? Agatha dropped to her knees. Take me, not them, not her. The presence paused, then laughter, low, ancient, mocking. You are already hollow. I need voice. I need memory wrapped in devotion. I choose. The reliquary cracked, a thin fracture down the center of the glass. June fell to the floor, convulsing. Sister Miriam screamed. Eleonora clutched her chest, and then silence. June's eyes opened, but not her voice. She pointed to the sacred grove, and in her mind all of them heard it waits for someone willing to end it or become it. It wasn't born here. Voluntatum, the will, did not begin in Bitter Creek, or in the skin-bound texts, or even with Sister Agatha's grief. It was older than the books, older than the Latin, older than Christendom itself. And it had been named before, only once, and that name was buried, like everything else it touched. But names never vanish. They wait in memory, dormant, coiled in quiet, like seeds. And Bitter Creek wasn't the first garden. The archives of Stonevale Monastery, long sealed by papal order, contain a single unindexed volume, leather-bound, unmarked. A book that never appears on any inventory list, yet it remains untouched until now. 2 weeks before the relic was found at Bitter Creek, Father Elias, the same priest who heard Amara's final confession, had been at Stonevale. He was dying. Lung cancer. Throat eaten by smoke and sorrow. But before he lost his voice entirely, he dictated a letter to the Archdiocese of Boston. It was never delivered. It remains in the vaults beneath the diocese, sealed, unread, except by one archivist. Her name was Sister Vereen. She disappeared 3 days later. But not before she made a copy of Elias' final words. It was not the first time. We found another case. Ireland. 1884. A convent outside Carlow. 4 nuns. 3 vanished. 1 burned herself alive in the chapel. She left 1 word written in ash on the altar voluntatum. The Carlow incident was scrubbed from church history. Official records show the convent closed due to financial distress. But the village remembers. Whispers passed through generations. Of bells that rang on their own. Of flowers that wept in winter. Of a chapel that sank 2 inches into the ground as if the earth itself tried to swallow it. In the last days of the Carlow convent, a Sister Bridget had written letters. To no one in particular. Just pages stuffed between hymnals under pews behind bricks. Some were found by children years later, most burned by a parish priest who feared their power. But 1 letter survived, now kept in a private collection, in Madrid. It reads, "There is something inside me. Not sin, not sickness, but silence that is not mine. It speaks in me like water flooding a cave. It showed me things, my mother's last breath, my brother's drowning, my own grave. And I knew this was not God. This was not angel nor demon. It was will, want, waiting. It enters through sorrow and stays through shame. And now, I am the container." She ended with, "If I burn it, stays. If I scream, it spreads. But if I pray, maybe, it forgets me." It didn't forget. Not her, not Amara, not Bitter Creek. Because this thing, this will, doesn't want death. It wants residence. It wants permanence. It wants to pass from vessel to vessel through secrecy, through guilt, through the sacred spaces where humans bury what they dare not confess. In 1912, in Corsica, a monastery fell silent for 100 days. No services, no contact. When finally breached, only 1 monk remained, alive, blind, mouth stitched shut with twine. He had drawn symbols on every wall in blood and ash. 1 symbol repeated, the triangle, the circle, the heart. Beneath it, scrawled in cracked charcoal, "Non est demon, non est deus, est memoriam." It fames. It is not a demon, it is not God, it is memory and hunger. These stories were all erased, brushed aside by priests who couldn't understand, silenced by bishops who feared the return, because the church, in its hunger for order, buried what it could not bless. And silence became their only doctrine. But silence, like flesh, rots. And voluntatum waits in that rot. Bitter Creek was simply the next fertile ground, not because of sin, but because of sorrow. The soil was grief, the water was memory, the sun shame. And Amara? She was the seed. The truth is brutal. It's not just that she was chosen. She was primed, raised in a world where pain is hidden, where silence is virtue, where shame is never named. She learned, as so many holy women do, that suffering in secret is sacred, and voluntatum fed on that lie. It entered not through evil, but through obedience. Through the crack between devotion and denial. It lives not in hell, but in the hollow, between memory and voice, and now it has remembered its name again. It has found a place where enough pain has pooled, enough silence has gathered, enough memory remains unspoken. It is hungry, and it wants legacy. Brother Eli had always kept to the edges. In the convent's daily rhythm, he moved like a shadow, silent, steady, present without intrusion. He spoke little, prayed often, tended the garden as though each root held a soul. The sisters trusted him instinctively, the way one trusts the old stones of a chapel, worn but enduring. But after the reliquary was unearthed, He changed, not visibly, but inwardly in the way he paused longer by the willow tree, in how his gaze lingered on the soil as if listening, and how when the sisters began dreaming of Amara, Eli stopped sleeping altogether. He began keeping vigil outside the sacred grove, not out of fear, but out of memory, because Brother Eli had seen Voluntatum before, not here, not now, long ago, before he took the cloth, before he changed his name, before he buried a secret deeper than any relic. His real name was Elias Carmody. And in 1982, he was a boy of 15 living in Vermont, a runaway from a broken home, taken in by St. Jude's Asylum in East Sussex under a quiet British relocation program for troubled youth. It wasn't a place of healing, it was a place of containment, and it held things the church didn't want to name. He remembered a girl named Isabel, eyes too large for her face, always humming, always drawing circles in chalk on the stone floor. She whispered to the wall at night. And then, one morning, she was gone, just gone, no goodbyes, no belongings. Only a circle, a triangle, and a heart drawn in blood on the ceiling above her bed. The staff said she had been rehomed, but the smell in the room lingered for weeks. Burned iron, lilacs, damp stone. Eli had never told anyone. He'd buried it deep, like the rest of the asylum's ghosts. But when he came to Bitter Creek 30 years later and saw the sacred grove for the first time, he knew it was the same scent, the same hum. And when Amara vanished when the bell rang once at 7:04 p.m., he knew Voluntatum had found another garden. He said nothing. Because the church says nothing, because silence is contagious, and because fear can wear a habit just as easily as faith. But now, as June writhed with visions, as Amara's voice crept through the stone as Agatha confessed, Eli could no longer hide. He called for Mother Eleonora, asked her to summon all the sisters, and then, for the first time in 20 years, he spoke. Really spoke. I knew before any of you. I knew because I ran from it once and it followed me. I was a child, alone, no faith, no protection, just skin and secrets. And it tasted me but did not take me. It needed more. It needed structure. It needed ritual. It needed the church. He walked to the reliquary and placed his hand on the glass. His palm sizzled, but he did not flinch. This isn't the first time it made itself sacred. That's the danger. It doesn't enter through evil, it enters through reverence. It mimics holiness until we pray to it, and then we belong to it. June gasped from the floor. Amara said I gave it my breath, and it gave me silence. Eli nodded. It's pact. It offers silence in exchange for memory. But silence is not peace, it's storage. And eventually, something always opens the door. Eleonora stepped forward. Then why come here? Why stay? His eyes softened. Because I hoped I could stop it. Because I thought if I stayed close to where it grows, I'd feel when it bloomed again. Because guilt is a powerful anchor. And because I owed her. The sisters looked at one another. Her? Miriam asked. Who? Isabel, Eli said. The girl who vanished in the asylum. She drew the first sigil I ever saw. She bled in silence. And I turned away. I was afraid. I did nothing. And Voluntatum took her. He looked at June, but Amara was different. She turned toward it. She tried to hold it. And she almost did. Until silence cracked. From his robe, Eli removed something no one had seen before. A locket, tarnished. Inside, a small lock of red hair, not Amara's, not his, Isabel's. I kept it, he whispered, as a reminder of what fear costs. But now I think it's more than that. I think it's a key. June's eyes widened. She pointed to the reliquary. It's responding. Indeed, the pulse within the case grew brighter, faster, warmer, not in hunger, in recognition. The relic knew the hair, knew the memory, knew the grief. Eli placed the locket beside the case, and it stopped pulsing. For the first time in days, stillness, not silence, peace, brief. It needs to be reunited, Eli said, not just with memory but with truth. The ones it has touched must come together, We are its pattern, we are the wound. Only we can choose to close it or let it feed. Eleonora's voice shook. Then what happens now? Eli looked to the grove. Now we finish what Amara started. But this time not with silence, this time with voice. What would you do if the silence was protecting something sacred?